The 911 call came in at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in October. The voice on the other end was shaking, desperate, broken. "Please, you have to help me. They're all dead. My wife, my kids. There's blood everywhere. I don't know what happened. Please send someone." What the emergency operator didn't know was that she was listening to a killer, a man who had just murdered his entire family and was now performing the greatest act of his life. 3 bodies lay cooling in a suburban home. A mother and 2 children, ages 8 and 12, slaughtered in their beds, and standing over them, fake tears streaming down his face, was the man who had promised to love and protect them forever. This isn't just another family murder. This is the story of a psychopath who fooled everyone. His neighbors, his friends, even seasoned detectives, until one tiny mistake brought his house of lies crashing down. What you're about to hear will change how you see the person sleeping next to you, because sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one who kisses you goodnight. Before we dive into this nightmare, I want to thank each and every one of you who've made this channel what it is today. Your support, your comments, your shared stories, they mean everything to me. And if you're new here, if cases like this both fascinate and terrify you, hit that subscribe button right now, because what we're about to uncover together will stay with you long after this video ends. From the outside, they were everything America dreams of being. He was 38, she was 35. Married for 14 years. 2 beautiful children who excelled in school and played sports. They lived in a 4-bedroom colonial in one of those neighborhoods where people still wave at each other. He coached Little League baseball. She volunteered at the school library. They attended church every Sunday, sitting in the 3rd pew from the front, always together, always smiling. Their social media told the story of domestic bliss, family vacations to Disney World, birthday parties with homemade cakes, date nights at local restaurants where they'd pose with their arms around each other like newlyweds. But social media lies, and this family's Instagram perfect life was built on a foundation of secrets, manipulation, and a darkness so complete that even their closest friends never saw it coming. The first crack in the facade appeared 3 months before the murders. She had started asking questions about their finances. Why were they behind on the mortgage? Where had their savings gone? Why was she getting calls from debt collectors? He had answers for everything. The economy was tough. His business was going through a rough patch. They just needed to tighten their belts for a few months and everything would be fine. But she kept digging, and that's when she discovered the first lie. He wasn't just behind on bills. He was drowning in debt. Gambling debts, credit card debts, business loans that he'd never mentioned. They weren't just broke, they were hundreds of thousands of dollars in the hole. But money wasn't the only secret he was keeping. There were other women, multiple affairs that had been going on for years, hotel receipts, phone records, a double life that he'd managed to hide from everyone. She confronted him on a Sunday evening in July. The children were upstairs doing homework. She laid out the evidence on their kitchen table like a prosecutor presenting a case. Bank statements, credit card bills, photos from his phone that she'd found, text messages to women whose names she didn't recognize. He didn't deny it. Instead, he did something that chilled her to the bone. He smiled. "What are you going to do about it?" he asked. That's when she realized she wasn't married to the man she thought she knew. She was living with a stranger who had been wearing her husband's face for 14 years. She started making plans to leave, quietly, carefully. She opened her own bank account. She researched divorce lawyers. She began documenting everything, his spending, his affairs, his lies. What she didn't know was that he was watching her every move. He had installed spyware on her phone. He was reading her emails. He knew about the bank account, the lawyer consultations, the custody research. He knew everything. And he was making plans of his own. The life insurance policies were substantial, $500,000 for her, $250,000 for each child. If they died in a home invasion, if they were victims of a random crime, he would collect over $1 million, enough to pay off his debts and start fresh somewhere else. He began researching methods, how to stage a break-in, how to make murders look random, how to eliminate DNA evidence. His internet search history from those final weeks reads like a killer's handbook. How long does gunshot residue stay on hands? Best way to break into a house? How to fake being attacked? Do security cameras work in the dark? How much life insurance before it's suspicious? But it was his final search that revealed the true depth of his depravity. How to kill children quickly so they don't suffer. He wasn't just planning to murder his family, he was planning to do it efficiently. The murders were scheduled for October 15th, a Tuesday. He had it all worked out. He would drug their evening tea with sleeping pills. Enough to keep them unconscious, but not enough to show up clearly in an autopsy. Then he would stage a break-in, kill them all, and call 911 as the traumatized survivor. But she sensed something was wrong. Call it intuition. Call it survival instinct. On October 14th, she packed bags for herself and the children and told him she was taking them to her sister's house for a few days. "I need some space to think," she said. He couldn't let that happen. If she left, if she had time to think, to plan, to talk to lawyers, his whole scheme would fall apart. He had to act that night. October 14th, the night that changed everything. He waited until they were asleep. The children went to bed at 9 p.m. like always. She followed at 10:30 after packing the last of their clothes for the trip to her sister's. He gave it another hour, then he moved. The 12-year-old's room was first. The child never woke up. One moment asleep, the next moment gone. Quick, efficient, the way he'd practiced in his mind. The 8-year-old's room was next. This one stirred, opened sleepy eyes, saw Daddy standing over the bed with something in his hand. But it was too late. She heard the second sound. A mother's instinct jolted her awake. She knew something was wrong. She called out for the children. No answer. She got out of bed, started toward their rooms, and that's when she saw him in the hallway. Blood on his clothes, blood on his hands, a look in his eyes that she'd never seen before. She ran, not toward the children. Some part of her already knew it was too late for them. She ran toward the front door, toward escape, toward help. But he was faster, stronger, and he'd been planning this moment for weeks. The struggle was brief. The neighbors would later say they heard nothing. No screams, no sounds of violence. Just the quiet suburban night, interrupted only by the distant sound of a train passing through town. At 3:47 a.m., he called 911. But here's what he didn't know. Here's the mistake that would destroy his perfect plan. The house had a smart doorbell, one of those Ring cameras that records everything, and it had been recording all night long. The first officers on scene found exactly what he wanted them to find. A broken window in the back door, signs of a struggle in the living room, a traumatized husband holding his dead wife in his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "They broke in," he kept repeating. "They killed my family. They killed my babies." The EMTs had to physically pull him away from her body. He was putting on the performance of his life, and it was convincing. Almost. Detective Martinez had been working homicides for 15 years. She'd seen grieving husbands before. She'd seen real trauma, real shock, real devastation, and something about this man's grief felt wrong. It was too perfect, too performed, like he was showing her what grief looked like instead of actually feeling it. But feelings aren't evidence, and the evidence seemed to support his story. Broken glass, muddy footprints, a house turned upside down by what appeared to be burglars looking for valuables. The husband's story was consistent. He'd been asleep in the master bedroom when he heard glass breaking. He got up to investigate and was attacked by two men wearing masks. They knocked him unconscious. When he woke up, his family was dead. It was a good story, it almost worked. But Detective Martinez noticed something odd. The husband had injuries, bruises on his face, a cut on his forehead, but they were all superficial. The kind of injuries you might give yourself if you were trying to look like a victim. More importantly, the blood spatter patterns were wrong. If the family had been killed by intruders, if there had been a struggle, the blood should have been everywhere. Instead, it was contained, controlled, like the work of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The breakthrough came 3 days later, when the crime scene techs finished processing the house. They found the smart doorbell footage that he'd forgotten about, hours and hours of video from that night. And guess what it showed? No intruders, no masked men breaking in through the back door. But it did show him, at 2:15 a.m., 30 minutes before the murders, stepping outside in his pajamas and slippers, and it showed him breaking his own back door from the inside, creating the break-in that would become the foundation of his alibi. The doorbell camera captured everything, the fake break-in, the staged crime scene, even the moment he called 911, practicing his panicked voice before dialing. He thought he'd planned the perfect crime, but he'd forgotten about the one witness he couldn't control or manipulate or kill. Technology. When Detective Martinez showed him the doorbell footage, his face went white. All that confident grief, all those tears, all that righteous anger at the killers who destroyed his family, it evaporated in an instant. "I can explain," he said, but he couldn't. How do you explain staging your own crime scene? How do you explain breaking your own door to fake a break-in? How do you explain being caught on camera in the act of creating evidence? His lawyer advised him to say nothing, but he couldn't help himself. He was a narcissist who believed he was smarter than everyone else. He thought he could talk his way out of anything. So he tried to spin a new story. Yes, he'd broken the door, but only after the real killers had left. He was trying to make it look like a break-in so the police would take the case seriously. He was afraid they'd blame him if they thought it was domestic violence. It was a ridiculous story, but he told it with such conviction, such apparent sincerity, that for a moment even Detective Martinez wondered if she'd gotten it wrong. Then the digital forensics team finished analyzing his phone. The search history was damning enough, but it was the deleted text messages that sealed his fate. Messages to a woman he'd been having an affair with. Messages sent the day before the murders. "It's almost over," he'd written. "One more day and I'll be free. We can be together and have the life we deserve." The woman had replied, "Are you sure about this? There's no going back." And his final message, sent at 11:47 p.m. on October 14th, just 4 hours before the murders, "I'm sure, by tomorrow night, everything will be different." But the most damning evidence came from the children's devices. The 12-year-old had an iPad. The 8-year-old had a tablet for school. Both devices had been recording audio all night, a parental control feature that he'd forgotten about. The recordings captured everything. The sound of him entering their rooms, the brief muffled sounds of the murders, even his voice, cold and methodical, talking to himself as he moved through the house. "Okay," he could be heard saying, "now the scene, make it look real." There was no emotion in his voice, no grief, no trauma, just a man methodically executing a plan he'd been working on for weeks. The jury would later say that listening to those recordings was the most chilling experience of their lives. To hear a father murder his own children with the same emotional detachment as someone doing household chores. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The prosecution painted a picture of a man drowning in debt, caught in lies, facing the loss of everything he'd built his identity around. A man who saw his family not as people to love, but as obstacles to overcome. The defense tried to argue that it was a crime of passion, that he'd snapped under pressure, that the loving father and husband had experienced a psychotic break and didn't know what he was doing. But the evidence told a different story. The weeks of planning, the internet searches, the life insurance policies, the methodical execution. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was premeditated murder, carried out with cold calculation. His ex-mistress testified about their relationship, how he talked about feeling trapped by his family, how he joked about how much simpler life would be if he were single, how he'd once said that his wife and children were anchors holding him down. His business partner testified about the financial problems, the gambling addiction, the desperate schemes to make money, the lies upon lies upon lies. But it was the testimony of the children's teachers that broke the courtroom. They talked about 2 bright, loving kids who adored their father, who bragged about him to their friends, who couldn't wait for him to pick them up from school each day. The 8-year-old had written a Father's Day card just months before the murder. The teacher had kept it. She read it aloud in court. "Dear Daddy, you are the best daddy in the whole world. You make me feel safe and loved. I want to be just like you when I grow up. Love always, your little girl." There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Except for his. He sat stone-faced, unmoved by his own daughter's words of love and trust. The verdict came back in 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. 3 counts of first-degree murder. The jury recommended the death penalty. He's been on death row for 3 years now. Appeals are ongoing, but the evidence is overwhelming. The doorbell footage, the digital evidence, the audio recordings, there's no explaining it away. Prison hasn't changed him. He still maintains his innocence, still claims he was framed, still believes he's the smartest person in the room. He's written letters to journalists, to true crime podcasters, to anyone who will listen, spinning new versions of his story. But even hardened criminals want nothing to do with him. In prison, there's a hierarchy. And men who kill children, especially their own children, are at the bottom of it. He spends 23 hours a day in solitary confinement, not because he's dangerous to other inmates, though he is, but because they're dangerous to him. Even murderers have a code, and killing your own babies crosses a line that can never be uncrossed. His appellate lawyers have tried every angle: ineffective counsel, prosecutorial misconduct, jury bias, mental illness. Nothing has worked, because at the end of the day, the evidence is what it is. And the evidence says he's exactly what the prosecution claimed he was. A psychopath who murdered his own family for money and freedom. The families of the victims, her parents, her siblings, their friends, have started a foundation in memory of the children. They work to raise awareness about domestic violence, about the warning signs that everyone missed. Because here's the thing that haunts everyone who knew this family. There were signs, small ones, subtle ones, but signs nonetheless. The way he always had to be the center of attention. The way he never seemed to really listen when others were talking. The way he could lie so effortlessly about small things. The way he treated service workers, animals, anyone who couldn't benefit him. People who knew him describe him as charming, charismatic, successful. But looking back, they also remember moments when the mask slipped. When they caught glimpses of something cold and calculating underneath. This case terrifies me. Not because of the violence, though that's horrible enough, but because of how normal he seemed, how he fooled everyone for so long, how a man can live a double life, can hide such darkness behind such a convincing facade. We want to believe that evil announces itself, that monsters look like monsters, that we'd recognize a killer if we saw one. But this case proves that's not always true. The most dangerous predators are often the ones who look just like us, who live in our neighborhoods, who coach our children's sports teams, who sit next to us in church. They're not the obvious villains from horror movies. They're the charming neighbors who never forget to wave, the devoted fathers who never miss a school play, the loving husbands who still bring flowers home after 14 years of marriage, until the day they don't. If you're in a relationship with someone who lies about small things, who has sudden mood changes, who seems to lack empathy for others, who tries to isolate you from friends and family, pay attention to those red flags. Trust your instincts, and remember that domestic violence hotlines are available 24/7. This story ended in tragedy, but maybe, just maybe, sharing it can prevent the next one. If this case affected you the way it affected me, please share this video. Someone in your life might need to hear this story. Someone might be living with their own monster right now, and this could be the wake-up call that saves their life. Subscribe if you haven't already. We cover cases like this every week, always with respect for the victims, always searching for the truth, no matter how dark it gets. Hit that notification bell because next week we're diving into another case that will challenge everything you think you know about the people closest to you. Until then, stay safe. Trust your instincts, and remember, sometimes the person you trust most is the one you should fear most. The most terrifying monsters are the ones who sleep in our beds and kiss us goodnight.